It is Sunday, October 23 at 7:09, about to be 7:10 p.m., which used to be a normal Brave start time, but that's for baseball season next year. We have Jake with us. We've got one of our staff writers, Kieffer Milligan, with us. Thanks for popping on for in the place of Akshay, who has some family stuff this weekend. So glad you can make it on.
No problem.
Yeah, we're gonna run through our miscellaneous news as we usually do first. So Jake, what happened on the golf courses this weekend?
Yeah, we're leading with golf because this is probably the most under-known thing of the week. I didn't see much about it on the Twitters, but Golf Club of Georgia, relatively local tournament. Georgia Tech, I think, counts as the host here, and Tech took second place with a 22 under par on the weekend for their A team, and that's going to be interesting because they also fielded a B team who got fifth. So Tech really clogging up the top of the rankings there. Stanford did storm back from 6 strokes behind Tech's A team to take the win, which is a little disappointing. But Tech did wind up with the number one overall finisher in Hiroshi Tai. Ross Steelman got fifth, but was representing the B team, as well as Ben Ruder, who got 15th. We did ask about both of those guys last time. So, maybe coaches see something in practice, trying to get some other guys some different looks. But at least in this tournament, when we have the keys. We were able to put all 10 guys out there. So Ross and Ben were participating. And then also of note, Christo Lamprecht of the A team got 10th. Aiden Tran, I think, of the B team, and then Connor Howe of the A. One was A, one was B. I do remember that. Both tied for 20th. So Tech up and down the board, and really just shows the depth they've got there. In terms of other teams, Pepperdine, Tennessee, Washington, UVA, Texas A&M, Bama, Clemson, Duke, Southern California. Sorry, I almost said South Carolina, ETSU, and Wake Forest round out your list. So quite a good showing from local powers, and then the ACC as well, with notable defending ACC champions Wake Forest coming in dead last. So maybe we get a crown back there. Other than that, that's a pretty tight weekend for golf.
I would love some ACC titles in the future in whatever sport we can get them in. Speaking of titles in a sport, Kara Lee and Shara Brua won regionals since we last recorded at the ITA Southern Regionals, which was Southeastern Regionals, which was here. They had won the semifinals when we had last recorded, and Lee also got second in singles, so she'll be at the national tournament for that in San Diego. And then the men at their ITA Southeast Regionals both lost to some Athens folks, unfortunately. Chopra lost in the third round, 6-1 and 6-4, and then Sachdev lost in the consolation round of 32, 6-1, 6-2. Doubles took an early L, 8-6. That was Chopra and Bauer. So better news on the women's side, not as good news on the men's side. Baseball, surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, because I guess this happens, they had some exhibitions.
Yeah. So I guess it kind of snuck up on us. I did see some twittering prior to this, but Tech did host Jacksonville State. I almost said South Carolina again because I'm thinking Gamecocks. Geez, too many acronyms there going around. But they did host Jacksonville State for 2 7-inning games. The first game ended in a 5-5 tie. Luke Schmolke seemed to be the pitcher of record, at least, or at least the one they called out on Twitter. 2 innings pitched, 1 hit, no runs, and 4 strikeouts. So, hey, we need more pitching if last year was any indication. So that was good to see as well. Stephen Reed, John Gleischer, and Angelo Dispigna each had a hit or 2 and a couple RBIs. And then in the second game, Tech won 5-2 and 7 with Terry Bus. I don't know.
We'll
find out. 2 innings pitched, 1 hit, no runs, 5 strikeouts, with Nicholas Romero getting 2 hits for 2 RBI, Jackson Finley 2 hits, 1 RBI, and Karsten Savathia, he of CC Savathia's lineage, getting 2 hits, 1 home run, and 2 runs batted in. So certainly nice to see some production returning in the lineup there, considering we lost a heck of a lot of it. I know, at least for me, even the names that were familiar, other than Reed and Sabathia, of course, like Nicholas Romano. I might have said Romero the first time. Oops. Jackson Finley. Those are guys we didn't see a ton of, I think is fair to say, last year. And other than that, it's all new names. But we got 55 games in the spring to to really get to know them and be really familiar, kind of in the way that we have in the past. So a lot to look forward to there, but not a lot more to report on. They've got one more game coming up next weekend if you are in town Sunday.
Yeah.
Keith,
Sabathia has a
good.
pretty strong opportunity here. I think, he's listed as a third baseman as a recruit, and that's open. We had, Compton playing third base a lot of last year.
Right.
Just because Jenkins was at first. So Compton will probably slide back to first, where he's definitely far more comfortable. And that spot's available. So if Sabathia can come through, there's a few other guys out there that were pretty good. Guy Jake DeLeo can actually come back and have a full season. He is a big time talent, but pitching, I don't know where the pitching's going to come from, which I say every year, and the same thing happens. So I really hope that they can put a full team together for once, but I'm not holding my breath.
And then softball. Well, we had a fifth inning run rule. What is this? A little league game?
It's something like so. Softball does have pretty early run rules. I think it's 10.
That's right. Yeah,
four.
They do have those.
5,
yeah,
and then
it's the same
8
rules
after 6. Yeah. But they did play 7-inning doubleheaders for softball are normal because they only play 7 innings.
Right.
But they did that again against Bevel, whatever state on Friday. That was a run rule, and I only know that because somebody I know happened to be walking by and was like, "Oh, softball's happening. Oh, softball's over," on their way to volleyball. And then Sunday's results up in Dahlonega at North Georgia are unknown. So go figure. I hope they had a nice fall, but it's now over. So we have no idea what happened, and we'll see them in February.
And then finish up with club hockey.
Yep, 1-1 on the weekend against previously undefeated South Carolina. And it's actually South Carolina this time, I promise.
Hey.
So Tech did wind up finishing the weekend on a strong note. First loss of the season to a pretty good team. So all good.
Upcoming this weekend, baseball plays again. They're going to host Kennesaw State on Sunday at 1 o'clock. The cross country team heads to ACC championships in Earlysville, Virginia on Friday. And then also on Friday, swim and dive is going to go to FSU. So some lovely either important late season action, mid season action, or preseason action. We got all the seasons coming up here. And then before we get to football, let's hear from section 103.
Yeah. And with swimming heading on down to FSU, that meet is usually outdoors. Can speak for it. I've been to that pool. And if you're swimming an outdoor meet, one of the most important things that you can do is stay warm on deck. Section 103 definitely has you covered there. And you'll look like you'll fit in with the team if you're wearing Georgia Tech stuff when you are at said outdoor pool in Tallahassee in November. In terms of long sleeve stuff from Section 103, I personally love my Tech faux baseball zip up. That is a great little grab. But they've also got, as we've noted, Coach Brent Key style sweatshirts coming soon. So that's plenty to look forward to and pre-order. In addition, their crew necks are great. The jackets with the GT and the national championships is something I own in short sleeve because I was too eager and wanted to buy 2 t-shirts instead of waiting for one crew neck. But their crew necks are very soft as well. And of course, they have all that stuff in the logo and the word mark as well, including the ATL logo. So definitely check them out. Free shipping over $70, section103.com. You know the drill. Follow them on Twitter and interact with their polls as well to decide what comes next, because Stephen is very attentive to the fans as well as the trends with the, sawed off Brent Key sweatshirt action that he's got going on there too. So.
Back to the football situation, which I guess let's just take a breath here and acknowledge that we're not perfect still, despite how lovely the last 2 weeks were. Before Thursday, we lost 16-9 to the Virginia Cavaliers at home under the lights. Was not the vibes of this game. Let's start there because all of us watched this or were either there on TV. The commentators made note of like how loud it was, and then I saw the crowd was 29,000 people. So that part was a little bit of cognitive dissonance for me, or just the commentators trying to make it seem fun for a Thursday. But what did you all pick up? Kieffer, go first. You're the guest.
It was just sloppy and pretty. Once Sims left, the offense became pretty lifeless. Gibson was not good, which surprised me. I really wanted to see Gibson based on some of the stuff when he transferred, I watched his film at Akron in the past year when he was starting, and I came away pretty impressed. I thought that he had some tools in terms of his accuracy, and what was weird is when in the games I watched at Akron, what stood out to me was his toughness. That didn't show up.
No.
He was falling down before the defenders got there. He was giving up on the last play and acknowledging that. None of that is what I saw in the Akron film. So by the end of the game, I got to see him play, but then I was by the end saying, okay, let's try anything else. Wildcat, throw Pumachan out there and just have him run every time. If he can't throw or read anything, just have him run the football every time. Can it really be any worse than this? Gibson has a good ball coming out of his hand.
Yeah.
Like it just wasn't accurate. He was constantly overthrowing guys. He was dancing around in the pocket. He was not stepping up in the pocket properly. He just looked lost, and he looked like a guy who wasn't prepared to play, even though Sims was clearly not 100%. And that's baffling. That's coaching. That's on Gibson and the coaches.
Yeah.
This game, obviously, I'll admit I was not on the higher Brent Key train before. And my kind of big fear was that he would run through the Coastal, which I think is worse than a lot of G5 divisions, and then get the job off that. That didn't happen. That's, if you want a silver lining, hopefully we wouldn't make what I would consider to be a suboptimal hire based on bad Coastal opponents. But it just overall, the coaching was poor. The toughness was poor. I thought the defense did a few things, but I think we also have to remind ourselves here, this Virginia offense was abysmal. Absolutely abysmal. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't.
They had one good Madden spin move play, and that won them the game.
Right, and they dropped another touchdown. Right, and they missed how many field goals? We're talking about special teams. I was looking at special teams EPA or whatever, and Tech was better. I was like,
they missed. I think at one point there was 4 or 5 kicks missed in the game between the one field goal we had hit, and then they missed their field goals, and both of us had missed extra points.
And then they actually got a punt blocked. So
yeah.
We had a point as well in there.
This is not a good team that Tech was playing, and a lot has been made about Tech's improvement on special teams, and they're not getting punts blocked anymore, but they're still having issues. The adjustments they made to stop those punt blocks are leading to outkicking the coverage and other types of issues like that. As well as the big fix for the field goal unit was just switching from Jude Kelly to Stewart. Like, any coach with half a brain should have done that, which tells you a lot about Jeff Collins. This is not some genius level adjustment.
We have Gavin Stewart corner on this podcast now because of this.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't disagree with any of that, and I think it's pretty Kieffer. I think a perspective that you bring, like me and my fandom, is like just like reality, because I'm very much like the dreamer, right? Like I see Brent Key and I go like, man, like he's one of us, he's doing good, like wow, maybe he is an option, and obviously not like serious, like go call Dave Clawson or Jamie we'll get to that, but obviously not a serious candidate, but the part of me that's like the sports optimist wanted to believe, right? Wanted it to be a good story, wanted it to like beat these garbage level teams. No offense to Virginia or Duke or whomever, but teams that Tech should have a chance of beating. Like it felt like we had a chance. And in terms of just like the vibes, it's long been something, I think, in ACC circles, right? Like Virginia Tech has had, like, Thursday night has been like one a year, like their thing. Like they pack out Lane Stadium. It's a nighttime thing. It's electric, whatever. I don't think that really translates to many of the other fan bases. And I think Tech's reflected that as well, given like crowd kind of feeds off the team. The team kind of feeds off the crowd. It wasn't that big. the team didn't really do anything, and the minimal group of people that showed up weren't really responding. That said, I thought the students turned out well, but in terms of just like being there and like watching Gibson struggle, watching the offense essentially look non-existent for an entire football, like we got a touchdown, but it was a pick six, right? Like you can't really credit the offense as having done anything, and it was, at least from a just like entertainment point of view, even I was just kind of like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Is that a fair way to put it? I mean, Jack, you were a block away and you weren't even there. Like,
No, I
I mean,
wasn't.
it's
I mean, I wasn't
cold,
there because I
but
just didn't want to like be outside that late, knowing that it could have been. And I'm just weak to the cold, and I just kind of knew this. There was a real shot this was going to be a dumpster fire game versus something entertaining from a football sense. So I mean, yeah, it was. Ugh, it got hard to watch at the end. And speaking of hard to watch, I'm looking at just the total EPA right now. We won the absolute value battle in terms of had a total EPA of negative 34.84 to Virginia's negative 26.85. So just, it was a garbage shoot everywhere for the most part. Virginia gained 3 points just on penalties. We gained 2.25 on penalties. Yeah, not the greatest of days by any means. Our EPA per play was negative 0.45, which is in the worst percentile you can get. So that's fun. I do like your note, Kieffer, about just like running the coastal could have led to some, not just to some thinking that was not going to be helpful.
Yes.
I in my head, I think I mean I had at least known like he was definitely not going to be the savior in any way or shape or form. Running the coastal was an option there, knowing everything, but I think I wouldn't go as far as to say like I'm glad we lost so that the key train could stop, basically. But I think there's an element of bringing this down to reality. Maybe a win would have been nicer, but at least this performance showed the variance still that exists in this team. Go ahead, Jake.
Right.
yeah. So I was going to say, on that note, is there really anything we can take away from this game? Like, Gibson wasn't too effective. Key and his staff didn't really seem to have made many adjustments coming out of the half or anything like that. Like, I just didn't see anything that made me go like this. I don't want to say nothing that's redeeming, but like, it's one of those games that harkens back to the Jeff and Davey P, 2019, 2020 specials, 2021 of just like what are we doing here? Right?
Kieffer,
like what? Kieffer, Jack, is there anything we can take away from this?
To me, it's time to move on. This is the big takeaway, but I think if you're looking for a positive takeaway, I'll give you this. I was very impressed with the defensive front, specifically the interior defensive line. I thought played, and yes, this is a bad rush. This is a bad rush offense they're going up against, but they've shown me more this year than they showed me in how many years under Paul Johnson. That was always a struggle pain point, other than a few bright spots. Today they played well. They were making tackles for loss. They were getting penetration to the backfield on run plays. They were getting off blocks and making tackles themselves. This past recruiting class is supposed to have some of the most highly rated DTs that Tech has brought in a long time, and we haven't even seen those guys yet. Yet we're still having guys produce like Scott and Biggers. I thought both of those guys played a pretty good game. If there's a bright spot to be taken from this, it's that group is young, that group is developing, and I think that'll serve the next coach well at a position that Tech has historically and probably will continue to in the future struggle to field, just by its nature of how competitive it is to recruit and things like that. I think kind of going back to Jake's comment about wanting to be an optimistic fan. I feel like my role in this whole search, and one of the reasons I kind of set out on the whole coaching profile thing anyway, is kind of be that soulless killjoy and take emotion out of the decision process, because that's how we got here, isn't it? Todd Stansbury couldn't separate himself emotionally from his decisions.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's how we got in bad contracts. That's how we got Jeff Collins. That's how we got constantly going after tech man hires. We really got to move on.
Stansbury himself was a tech man hire too.
It was, although I was worried that after we fired him, and I know you were a big fan of his, I was not, but my worry was that no one would touch this job because of the debt. We got somebody, so I guess that was not completely founded, but we don't know who said no after looking at those numbers, and I wouldn't surprise me if there were a few that did that.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame them.
No, I think I don't have any inside information on this, but I think part of the Babinski problem was, other than he was just the worst, was that he didn't know what he was getting into in terms of this debt and didn't know how to get out of it. So he stuck his head in the sand until he could get a job to get out of it and left for Purdue. That's what I think happened with Babinski. So though he wanted to fire Paul Johnson and pay that buyout for some reason, but that's kind of what I thought happened. I think that's why Radakovich left. So I'm glad we have Bat. We'll learn a lot about him really quickly. So I like that too. We're going to learn a lot about his decision process based on who he interviews and who he eventually hires.
Yeah. I do like how you noted development. We can maybe develop some people finally, because we know a coaching hire that can prompt that idea and make it a reality would be fantastic. And on that coaching idea, we did bring you here specifically to talk about the coaching carousel as of now and what it could look like. I was at Jay Bat's introductory press conference, and I mean, it was brought up immediately about like, hey, what are you going to do about the football coach? And he was just like, my first day is not for a week. Give me a break here. I still need to figure out like my surroundings and totally understand. And his first day is actually tomorrow. So by this day tomorrow, he'll have completed his first full day on the job. But he's been around. He was at football. He was at volleyball on Friday. So he's been around. Jake, you got a note before we go on?
I was going to say, I've got just a general comment. I think that press conference was after we last recorded. So I don't know if we've done many takes on that.
Oh yeah, I guess I could talk about that.
But he has been around. He was at the game on Thursday. Yep. I mean, he's brought his family around. I think it's not something that we're going to see right away of hiring a coach. And if anything to be learned from the last time we hired a coach is that process was honestly shockingly fast. So the fact that he's saying, hey, let me get here and go through this and, do his due diligence. I think it's certainly not a bad sign. At least I think he's where I'm
dare I say his last week was AD facet.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, go to volleyball, figure out where the freaking volleyball team plays. You know, this is where your office is. Like
that was what was brought up. He was like, I need to find my office. I need to find where the coffee was. He said that multiple times in the press conference. So he was all about that this week. Kieffer, tell me about, you said you're trying to be as objective, I guess, as you can be in terms of who we find as a coach right now. Knowing where the team is now, and I guess it's hard to say what kind of team we could become because it's fully dependent on what kind of coach we get and what style they want to implement. But just from what we know now, what do you think are the top priorities in terms of who we go get as a head coach hire?
Really, and I know y'all had Robert on this podcast a long time ago. I think it was probably before
preseason.
But yeah, it was okay. It was before we started publishing all those profiles, though we were writing them at the time. We did not think we would start doing it after the Ole Miss game. We were aiming for 1-4 start. That's when because that's when the fire talk would start happening. But then Ole Miss happened. We're all right, I guess we're just going to start publishing. And we led off with Chadwell. But what we're trying to do is frame the discussion around evidence. Statistical, mathematical, provable evidence. I mean, isn't that what Georgia Tech should embrace? I mean, you have all these resources, and Todd Spanzer is out here making decisions on emotion. So we were trying to look at coaches based on the statistics, the outputs they have put on the field on a play-by-play statistical basis, and determine, do they improve their teams from what they inherited? And can we prove it? And for some guys, there really is no evidence. Either they haven't coached above the FCS level, or they haven't been a head coach before, or they haven't even been a coordinator before. So with those types of guys, we're trying to look at those guys and say, hey, there's nothing here that we can judge and anything talked about here is simply going to be conjecture at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So we sat down and we tried to compile a list of guys that we could get data on and that we could show that they improved their stops after they arrived. And then when we did that, once we got our list together, we started writing these profiles and we started collecting the data. And we collected data on some guys that we ended up not writing profiles on because we couldn't create a story. That's what we wanted to do. Get the evidence, show the evidence, create a story with that evidence. So what we should be looking for, with all that said, is someone who takes programs that are not doing well in places that are difficult to win and create success on a play-by-play basis, not just in the record books, at those stops. The more stops that coach has done it at, the better. So that's what we set out to do. And that's how we landed on Jamie Chadwell as our number one candidate. He's done that at 3 different stops. Now, one was D2, one was FCS. But he also took this Coastal team from a team that was an FCS, and then they came to FBS, and he's improved them dramatically, especially since taking over as head coach. And a lot of people want to point out, okay, well, that's just Grayson McCall. He struck gold with Grayson McCall, and once Grayson McCall graduates, it's not going to look as good. And once he comes here, he's not going to have Grayson McCall, and it's not going to look as good. This guy was going to the FCS playoffs every year. This guy was going to the D2 playoffs every year. There was no Grayson McCall there.
Yep.
This is not a one-off. Everyone focuses on what he did at Coastal. This guy builds programs. Nobody else we're talking about has built 3 programs. Unless you want to pony up the money to go get Dave Clawson, which I don't think anyone really does.
That's not that doesn't seem that terribly feasible right now.
No.
I would agree, especially with it being Wake and people can say like, oh, we think he makes this much. At the end of the day, like we don't know, right?
Yeah.
We can guess, but who says that Tobacco Road ain't gonna just dump more money in his pocket anyways to not leave.
And that program's on a very nice uphill trajectory too, and they're in the middle of that trajectory. So leaving now, that doesn't make any sense to me. But I like your note about Chadwell. He's built at every level. He's got so much very real experience and growing on top of it each time, to where I think that coming to Tech starts becoming a very logical step in that journey all the way up to a top tier FBS team if he can get there.
Yeah, and so I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. His second stop was Charleston Southern. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to win at Charleston Southern, even from an SCS standpoint. The Citadel, sorry for mentioning that one, and College of Charleston, which doesn't even have a football team, take up all of the media oxygen in that area. And you've got Clemson and South Carolina as well taking up all that oxygen. So they have nothing. That campus is not even really hardly in downtown. It's not in downtown. It's out a ways out of town. So they don't have much going for them there. And yet he was able to find success there. And he was their best coach as both a coordinator before he was a head coach and as a head coach after he arrived. He's the best coach in their entire history, before or since. So that's our number one guy.
Kieffer, just so people, it's on the record all in one place. What's your go-to line when somebody says like, "Oh, but sanctions. Oh, but sanctions," on the Chadwell?
Okay, so those sanctions had to do with 12 different sports, and last time I checked, Jamie Chadwell coaches 1 sport. So I think whoever is at fault is probably not Jamie Chadwell. He didn't get a show cause.
Yep.
Anyone who brings that up, and we put it in the risk section just because we knew someone would bring it up. Anyone who brings that up as a legitimate argument is not arguing in good faith. I'll give people the Grayson McCall credit, like they're arguing in good faith, because it is a problem that happens where guys strike gold in a quarterback and then they get elevated to jobs they don't deserve. But that ain't it. That's a completely bad faith argument. Mm-hmm. So that's our first tier one guy. My personal, and now Robert and I, while we both authored these profiles, we have uh, different tier one guys, though they're similar. And Jamie Chadwell is the guy, that's our number one guy. My second tier one guy, who Robert also likes, is Bill Clark. If you don't know who Bill Clark is, he was retired after 2021, the UAB head coach who was there before they got sent to non-existent land, and he was their coach when they came back. So he took a team that was not doing very well, started getting on the right track, and then they didn't exist for a couple of years, and then he brought them back and won, I think, 3 straight conference champion, or appeared in the conference championship game 3 times. I'd have to look at the profile.
Yeah, they were on a roll.
Yeah, they took, yeah. Okay, so 2014 he takes over the team 6-6 after they'd been losing. 2017 he wins 8 games in the first year they came back, and then in 2018, 19, and 20 they went to Conference USA championship 3 times in a row, winning it twice. So, Bill Clark, and because so let's talk a little bit about his before time. So in 2013 he was the head coach at Jacksonville State, where he took over. They won 11 games, and they made the FCS quarterfinals. Then his right-hand man takes over after he leaves from UAB, and they continue that success. And before that, he was on the staff that started the South Alabama program in 2009. So he has experience on a staff that created a team from nothing, and then he did a very quick job at Jacksonville State, elevating them, and then having his right-hand man sustain their success after he left. And then at UAB, he comes in, rights the ship, keeps everything together through the team not existing for 2 years, and then comes back and finds great success. It doesn't get much harder than what he had to do from a program building perspective. And that's okay. You're sensing a theme between Chadwell and Clark. They're program builders. They take nothing or very little and they build something out of it.
I must ask there then, at what level, where is Tech then? Are obviously we're not nothing, but like, would you call us bottom out?
Better.
Yeah.
It's way better than the UAB situation. I think Tech has some talented pieces on its roster. I don't think this roster, outside of a couple positions, offensive line, are truly a disaster zone. They're like I said, this is the best defensive line that we've had in years, I think. So there's something to build with here. And now Clark is a defensive guy, probably the only defensive guy I'm really high on, because defensive guys tend to be conservative, too conservative with their game management. So, but Clark's teams, a hallmark of Clark's teams is their discipline, their fundamentals. They aren't out of place. You're not going to see what you saw last year in 2021, busted coverage every other play. That's simply not what his teams are. And his teams were truly remarkable in terms of defensive success rate. I mean, the improvement he that he achieved on that defense at UAB was remarkable. One of the most impressive ones that we saw throughout our entire data digging that we did on all these coaches. So he's going to improve your defense, and he's going to have them play sound defense. He's going to have your team playing defense that your dad would say that's good defense. So the knock on him is probably going to be his offenses weren't that great at UAB. He was still winning championships. So he can build a program. And if you can give him the resources to go out and get a good offensive coordinator, you're really looking at a successful formula.
A building is going to be the theme here. And I mean, as much as he might be starting the process here, probably he won't make it all the way through. I mean, that's going to be odds on no. But I would laud him for at least getting stuff rolling in the right direction. And then hopefully we can hand it off to someone like these guys. Are either of these guys your most realistic option, or do we have to go to another direction there to be like, okay, here's probably who we're going to get just based off the landscape, what we can offer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
both these guys are realistic, but I think there are some caveats where they may not be interested. Chadwell, um, he could realistically stay at Coastal where he's finding success and wait it out for a job he wants more. I don't know the man. I don't know how interested he is in the Georgia Tech job, but he could wait for a better situation. But that said, he was in the conversation for both the South Carolina and the Tennessee jobs, and he was passed up. He's a Tennessee native. So the that was definitely maybe now that he's been passed up by the SEC twice, because the SEC looks for recruiter guys. They don't look for guys who scheme or develop. They look for guys who can win the recruiting battle every year. And I think it's stupid, but they do it anyway. That's to our benefit. We should take advantage of it. Clark retired in 2021. And I should mention that. He retired in 2021, but he left the door open on the way out. And he had back surgery. He had a back issue that was causing him, I think, a lot of pain that forced him to step down. He did have surgery, and it was successful. And reports are that he wasn't getting along with UAB's administration super well, the AD, and that it was kind of both a stepping down for the back issue so he could have surgery, and then kind of stepping down to get out of that work situation environment as well. So if that's true, that's reporting. If that's true, I would say he should absolutely be interested in a job like Georgia Tech where he can just do it again. The guy relishes building. So why not again? So I think both those guys are realistic from both a financial standpoint and just general realism standpoint. But I could also see them both saying no. But you have to make them say no.
Yeah.
Because those are the two, I think, that are the clear-cut tier one guys. I have one more guy that is a tier one guy with me, but he's a tier one with caveats. So we'll call it tier one minus.
Okay.
And that's Dan Mullen.
Yes.
So that's okay. Here comes the spicy takes. So Dan Mullen is interesting to me, not because of what he did at Florida, which he did find success at Florida before collapsing late, because he didn't recruit well, had a bad press conference where he said, we'll recruit after the season, which is something you just should never say. And then just not being able to find a quarterback to follow up Kyle Trask. He's not a good recruiter, though he recruited fine at Florida, but recruiting at Florida is easy. The logo recruits itself. He would not be able to recruit that well at Georgia Tech. But the guy is a great deployer. He's a great game day coach. He manages everything well, and he develops quarterbacks like nobody else Tech could reasonably have available. What he did at Mississippi State is really, I think, the closest thing I've seen to what the next coach of Tech has to do. Is just take a very bad team. That Mississippi State team was very bad. And then he had the biggest run of success in Mississippi State history. With Dak Prescott, and even after Dak Prescott, he had a down year after Dak left, and then he went straight back to a top 25 finish and nine wins, and then he left. So, and Mississippi State, in some ways, is actually similar. This is not really intuitive because people think, oh, Mississippi State, that's not, a high academic school like Georgia Tech. That's not the same situation. But when you frame it like this, and it's a school in a tough neighborhood playing a brutal schedule every year that they can't get out of, that doesn't have the resources of the guys that they're fighting against for recruits and resources and everything else, or eyeballs. But he turned them around. I think that's kind of where Tech is. Tech has some talent. They're not a program that doesn't exist. They're not a program moving up from FCS. They're not a program moving up from even G5. They're just a program that's down, that faces a brutal schedule year in and year out, and lives in a tough neighborhood. Dan Mullen turned that around without blinking. Could he do that here? Maybe, if he's interested in stopping being on TV, sure.
He did fly through here on the way to the studio on Saturday. We
all
know.
He did.
I was going to ask. I never actually followed up to see where he was going.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. The tweet after that was like him and wherever the studio was in New York or something. I was like, oh, okay. So he was literally just flying through here. Nothing more than that. I'll note that 2014 Mississippi State team, that was the year when I believe it was the year that Mississippi State and Ole Miss were ranked 1-2 for a week there before they ended up losing to guess who? Georgia Tech in the Orange Bowl that year.
Yes.
Fun stuff there. Yeah, Mullen would be that'd be hilarious. But yeah,
I would. Yeah, I'd like to touch on those caveats too before we get off the Mullen train. I want to touch on those caveats. Him being uninterested in recruiting. You had to kind of dig into that. He definitely wasn't as interested in recruiting as he should be. But as he completely mail it in, that's what a search firm's for. Search firm has to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah.
He has to not. While he doesn't have to be a hit the road guy and recruit his ass off, but he does need to show interest in it. And secondly, he's a prickly personality that has a reputation for being hard to work with. And if he can't form an effective staff because guys don't want to work with him, you can't hire him as a head coach. If he's burned up his goodwill within the coaching community. I don't know the answer to either of those questions. Those are my caveats, and that's why he's tier 1 minus. If both of those investigations come back favorably for him, he's firmly tier 1 for me. But if he's not, then I'm not interested at all. So you got to check those boxes. From a realism standpoint, he's not coaching. He has no buyout. There's no money to pay. The only thing that would keep him from, accepting this job is not wanting to rush into a bad situation while he's a cushy TV job.
Yeah.
So he could say no, but this might be the best opportunity he gets to get back into coaching for a while at the same time.
It's a good spot to build up from if he feels like getting to one of those perennial top power fives again, like he was at Florida. And I mean, Mississippi State, another division, is probably a powerhouse as well with where he got that team. So the track record's there until he fell off, and until last year's fall off, which, as I'm looking now, 5-6 in 11 games coaching last year. So not great. But before that, had not lost more than 4 games outside of his second to last year, Mississippi State, in a very long stretch. So yeah, he had a pretty good has a very good bowl game record too, as well, for what it's worth. He is 2-2 in a New Year's Six bowls. So pretty darn good. Jake, either of you any last words on who you want to have as a coach? I mean, nothing's going to really be resolved until we get a guy anyway, so there's not much we can go off of. But I mean, like, what are the current feelings right now, just so we can feel what we're feeling right now?
Those are my 3 tier 1 or tier 1 minus guys. Jake, I don't know if you have anyone you want to mention.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting just to see how kind of the discourse has changed since the last time we did this, or maybe even last year when we were talking about potential candidates. Just seeing how I think the name that probably most clearly comes to mind is Will Healy, who's recently fired from Charlotte, where things just aren't working out, right? I feel like Tyson Helton was a name I had heard thrown around last year as well. And just, it's nothing's ever guaranteed, right? We can't say that, just like certain times when it seems like coaching hires, cough, cough, Tony Elliott, seem to be happening. Even stuff like that isn't guaranteed. So I think just more than having other candidates in mind, it would be just hope that, J-Bot sits down with the numbers, with the people in the GTAA, and hears about what their needs are, what information is out there for him to use, and making sure that he's making a hire that not only is, somebody who's a schemer or a recruiter, but somebody who knows what they're getting into at Georgia Tech. Because I think one of the themes that we've kind of touched on tonight, maybe not so much the Mullen Florida part, but Mullen at Mississippi State, Chadwell everywhere he's been, Bill Clark basically everywhere he's been. I almost said Rick Clark. Oops. Like those are people who have handled tough jobs in unique situations, and Georgia Tech. I say this without any bias. It's a unique job, a unique situation, and it's a hard one. And whoever is going to come in is not only going to need to be able to scheme or recruit, but just know what they're getting into. Because I think in retrospectives that are already coming out about Jeff Collins, I don't like saying his name, but I'll put it out there. I think it seems like one of the things that people are saying is just he didn't adapt to everything he needed to do at a tough and unique situation. So
Jeff Collins was just a fool.
Yeah,
There's no bones about it.
yeah.
He did everything wrong, and I think more comes out the more I just am bewildered at how he even got to this point in his career, other than nepotism.
I mean, we can unbox your feelings about Matt Rule and the Carolina Panthers.
Let's not do that.
We're
But that
not
might be a
doing that
topic
here
for a
today.
different
That's-
podcast.
Because
That's
people
not-
are going to ask about like Matt Rule and whether or not, yeah. On a coaching profile standpoint, like, you're going to put stats on the paper, his college stats only, they look pretty good, but no, I'll just leave it at that. So we don't do that. So we don't do this. No.
We'll cut the coaching stuff there before we go too far into that. That was good. Thanks for your insight there, Kieffer. I learned a lot because that's my strong suit. So hopefully whoever we get, I will learn intimately in terms of his football career and all that kind of good stuff, so I can carry a conversation. I'm gonna quickly go into volleyball before we wrap up here. We had 2 games here at O'Keefe this weekend. We play in Boston College and Syracuse. Sweeps on both of them, thank goodness. 25-19, 13 and 18 over Boston College, 18, 21 and 20 over Syracuse. They were our 11th and 12th sweeps of the year. So that keeps us squarely in 3rd place in the ACC. This is where we were standing at the time. Tech was ranked number 10, back in the top 10 this week in the AVCA for both these matches. The Syracuse, they were 4th and pretty squarely in 4th, we had mentioned last week. But through some tiebreakers and whatnot, their loss to Georgia Tech today pushes them down to 6th. Julia Bergman notably got to eclipse the 1,500 career kill mark at Georgia Tech. She is getting closer to Maria Brambilla for 8th in school history, and by my projections, at least by the kills per set, and that we're basically sweeping everybody that's not a ranked team in the ACC. In 3 to 4 games, she'll probably hit that mark. Jake, you got to know.
Yeah, Jack, before people burn down our comments, I want them to know that her name's Mariana, not Maria Brambilla.
I said Maria, sorry. I thought I said it right.
Yeah, I was going to say that's how we get hate mail from a really specific subsection of people.
Yes,
but
Mariana,
in terms of overall conference looks, Syracuse, I don't want to say they hadn't played nobody in conference, but they've got some pretty clunkery losses, and the wins that they do have are Boston College, Duke, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, and Clemson. So nothing too
their overall
nothing
record
too crazy
is not great.
there.
Yeah. Good.
I did want to ask you one thing as well.
Yes.
I think one, as somebody who didn't watch the games but was following your tweeting live, Boston College and Syracuse, generally not great teams, not a ton of takeaways that we can take here. But the second set over BC, I saw very clearly that it was 24-8, and I see that the final score was 25-13. And we've talked about Tech having a tough time just getting a last point or even a clutch point, even if it's not at the end of the set. Thoughts on that? Because that's really the only thing I can take away from having not seen the games. So
thankfully, we were on track to win that set 25-5 at one point. Like we were just destroying them. It was just a cakewalk of all cakewalks I've seen, Keith, this year. And then it just happened again where you just lose it for a second. We had to call. I mean, we Tech allowed 5 straight points on set point. And I kept updating the tweet. Boston College saved 3 set points, 4 set points, and it just kept going. And eventually, Collier called timeout. She's like, "What the hell is going on here?" And then I think it was a service error, and we won the set after that. So no, it was that same. It was that problem again, but in terms of not closing it out. But I have a hard time putting in the same bucket as the other ones because the lead was so large at that point that I don't think the urgency matches, the intensity matches those other cases that we'd been seeing. But I think it's still worth bringing up still. Like, it still happened. And it also happened today.
Okay.
Syracuse had their own stretches. We had a 9-point stretch that we eventually gradually gave back to Syracuse a little bit, not all the way, but we were up a lot in the second set again, and then kind of let them claw their way back in. And Syracuse had a 6-point stretch at one point in the match. I don't have the article up that I wrote today, but they got back into it. Erin Moss today, though, had her career day. Her family was in town. She had 14 kills and 8 blocks for 19 points total, which was the most on Tech's team. Her and Bergman were going back and forth for who had the most kills late in the third set, which was really fun just to see them both just climb up as the day went on. Syracuse had no stopping for Moss whatsoever. The middle of the floor for them was an easy target. But I wanted to also note, Syracuse, they had only a 5-person bench. They lost a lot of folks before the season started, and they couldn't recruit fast enough to get folks to fill in the roster spots. So they only played with 11 people today. But they have this girl, Polina Shimanova, who is just insane. Jake, I really wished you were there to watch this girl serve. The ball went higher than Kayla's toss. She doesn't bend. She's taller than Kayla. She doesn't bend down as much on her serve, but it's faster than Kayla's serve. I swear to God, it's faster. And it just was all the things you would ever want to see in a serve. She had 3 aces. 2 of them just blew by everyone. I don't think they could react. Like it was the most perfect serves I've ever seen. So she's great, but then I looked it up. She's on Russia's junior national team. I was like, oh, this makes sense. She also had 19 points, but I just want to shout her out because as of a couple of games ago, she became Syracuse's career kill leader. So we got to see some history in front of us. Breland Morissette hit 833 today. We should go to her more because if she hits the ball, it's usually a kill. It's kind of insane.
I mean, that's at least I don't know how you feel explicitly as I feel about this, but middles have been working this year. Outside hitting is not. And every day that Morissette and Moss continue their relentless march towards being the most efficient possible volleyball players that you could be on the planet, it just makes me go, why even bother with outside hitting? Who needs it?
We used it more today.
I was in the car for both games, and Rec Radio doesn't broadcast through no fault of Rec Radio's own, by the way. They don't broadcast the games on the radio anymore.
You got to go through that was
a little bit tough. But one thing I will say, having been scoreboard watching the rest of the ACC, Pitt's defeat of number 2 Louisville does put them at 10-0 and in the driver's seat for the conference. Louisville does not lose regular season games, so that is very notable. Another 5-setter. They played a hell of a 5-setter last year as well. And then that just is all the more disappointing because if we beat Pitt, we would still control our own destiny in the ACC. So gonna need Louisville to get them back, and then for us to beat Louisville and Pitt in the return for all 3 of those 2-2. So it seems like an interesting weekend around the conference, at least.
That would be incredible if that could happen. Pitt now has 4 wins against top 10 teams this year, which is nuts. Louisville hadn't lost an ACC game since 2020 in the front half of the COVID year, but that makes 37 conference matches in a row, 36 in a row that they had won until today. So crazy stuff. That match went to 5 sets as well, 3-2. So it was exactly how that match should have gone in terms of an upset win over a powerhouse.
Until they posted that spring schedule in 2020, Tech had been the penciled in ACC conference winner, finishing the fall with the best slate. So definitely been very consistent since that very weird fall year for really every sport. But in terms of that's really all I got on volleyball. Like I said, it was mostly just scoreboard watching for me. So.
I would say for 2 teams that we should have beat, we beat them as we should have. We did not have that third set in Duke where it's just like, why are we giving them this? Why are we giving away the set? I never got the sense that we were giving away a set. So I'm calling that improvement. We took care of business when we needed to take care of business. There was multiple spots we were up 3 or 4, but it's still in striking distance to win, but also in striking distance to completely lose it. And it did not happen in those moments. So I am calling this weekend a win in progress in that sense. And then going forward, we have 4 straight road games. Just this weekend is in the great state of North Carolina, where we play North Carolina at 6 o'clock on Friday, and then NC State 1 o'clock on Sunday. Both games are on ACC Network Extra. And speaking of the ACC, let's move on to football stuff. Get some games here. We've got a Thursday nighter. We've got a bunch of Saturday games. A lot more of the conference plays this coming weekend. So let's do some quick picks here. Kieffer, Virginia Tech or North Carolina State, Thursday, 7:30 in Raleigh.
I would go with North Carolina State at home. VT's been shaky all year, and they've been improving some. And NC State, you don't really know exactly what you're going to get, but I don't have a lot of faith in either of these Virginia teams.
Yeah, I'm going with NC State here. Yeah, they're without their starting quarterback, and they seem to be kind of underperforming some of the expectations people had for them. But I until Virginia Tech and I guess Virginia too start doing things to prove me wrong, I'll wait on that.
I will take the Wolfpack as well, all the above reasons. And then moving to Saturday, this is the faux ACC game, Syracuse hosting Notre Dame, which the team that's 4-3 is not who we expect to be 4-3, and the team that's 6-1 is not who we expect to be 6-1. So, Jake, who do you got in the should be still called Carrier Dome?
Yeah, as much as I want to say that Syracuse is going to like have the wheels fall off the bus, I don't think they are. I think they learned a lot about themselves and maybe ACC reffing too on Saturday. I think they're at home, and much like Virginia Tech, Notre Dame hasn't exactly made me have to believe in them and be confident in them. So give me Syracuse, especially with the line only 2 points. I think they can. I think that game can be enough in the end that they can pull that off.
Kieffer, what you got?
Give me cues. Look at Notre Dame, a team that, based on emotion, hired a familiar guy instead of going for the optimal choice that was clearly in front of them, and now they're regretting it.
Tying things back in. I do want to note that Tech plays at Florida State at noon as well. So given that swimming is down there, I hope for their sake that the swimming guys can take in the game in Doak, because that's very interesting.
That'd be cool.
Ball yard.
That'd be cool. Yeah. I will also take Syracuse, because wouldn't that be great to see Notre Dame lose to Syracuse, just to say it happened one time. 12 o'clock, also UConn, Boston College. Oh, Lordy. Boston College is a 7.5-point favorite because, it's UConn and football. Kieffer, what you got?
So this is my sicko pick. So should I save it, or should I actually?
No, go ahead. Just give us a winner, and we'll do the line on your sicko.
Okay. Do I actually think UConn is going to beat Boston College? No, but I do want to point some things out. This is at UConn, which is interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a stadium sponsored by Pratt and Whitney.
Yeah, I didn't know that till right now. That's wild.
Yeah. So UConn, it's at UConn. It's a noon game. Boston College has beaten Louisville by 1 in Maine. That's it. They've lost to everyone else. Again, we're going to tie things back again. Boston College hired Jeff Hafley based on recruiting, and he didn't have a track record or any evidence that you could point to that said, hey, this guy builds up programs. He was just a co-DC at Ohio State, where he had some recruiting wins. He recruited to Ohio State. Good job. Recruiting doesn't travel like good coaching. So, yet another caveat emptor, when you're looking for a coach, focus on the things that travel well and focus on the things that matter, or you could end up regretting your choice down the road. So I guess I'm picking Boston College, but my sicko pick is not going to be Boston College.
Oh, good news. Jake, what you got?
Yeah. Man, as much as I want to pick UConn for the memes, I can't do it. I think Boston College wins. They might not cover, though. UConn looks a little bit better than they have in the past, even if they're not super tremendous.
I am picking the weather in this game. 53 degrees in Connecticut in the fall. That sounds amazing at noon. Not going to get too cold. You got the sun. I'm just going to pick the weather. That's my win for that game. 12:30, Miami, Virginia, both 3-4, both 1-win teams in the ACC. It is in Charlottesville at Scott Stadium. I guess I'm gonna pick Virginia here, because I want that maybe that validates our loss a little bit more. I don't know, Jake. What do you think?
I think Miami is packing it in and quitting pretty hard. They looked absolutely horrible this weekend, and I cannot imagine that they are getting up for a 3-4 Virginia team. Though, if you're going to pick the weather again, Scott Stadium, end of October, is a pretty awesome place to visit, having been there a couple of years ago.
Yes, that is good. Kieffer, which orange team are you picking?
I'm picking Raycom Sports. This is a Raycom deserved game at 12:30. if I really had to pick a team, I honestly think Miami will win this game. As much as I think they, maybe they'll pack it in. Maybe they will. I don't know, but they're probably not going to turn the ball. Probably not going to turn the ball over 8 times again. And Virginia
Yeah.
showed me nothing. Really, Georgia Tech just gave that game back to them. And had Sims been healthy, I think Tech would have won. Virginia has very little going for them. And like I said with VT, until these Virginia teams show me something, I'm not picking them.
Good call there.
Yeah.
3:30, Louisville and Wake Forest. Wake Forest is now see they're number 10 in the country now, 6-1, 2-1 in the ACC. Louisville is 4-3. Tickets as low as $10 at Cardinal Stadium to go see this game. Wake is favored by 5. Jake, would you? I would deign to think you would take the Demon Deacons.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Wake, even though Louisville's at home. Louisville, I think maybe is doing enough not to get sat fired, but I don't know. The claw fence provides.
It sure does. Kieffer, what you got?
So I think this game might end up being a little closer than is expected.
The line is only 5.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, Vegas already expects it. I had the same thought, Jake, that Louisville's doing enough to not get sat fired, but then Joey pointed out the remaining schedule is just awful. I think they have a non-conference that's difficult too, and it's escaping me. But it's Kentucky. Yeah, of course, it's all they always play Kentucky. But
Yeah.
the I think this will be closer because Louisville's been playing a lot better as of late. But give me Wake Forest. I don't think it'll be enough.
I'm going to pick the Demon Deacons as well. 8 o'clock, Pittsburgh, North Carolina. North Carolina ranked their 21st, 6-1 overall this year. Game is in Chapel Hill, only favored by 3. So not like Vegas ain't buying into this fully yet. I'm going to pick the Tar Heels here because it's at home. Kieffer, what you got?
Give me North Carolina. Pitt is turbo garbage, and I'll stand by that.
It's like they saw everything that they did well last year and were like, we don't want to do that anymore. And I know I'm kind of stealing that take from various other sources or just co-opting it for my own. So I appreciate everyone else who's pointing out all the things that Pat Narduzzi is doing to be very Pat Narduzzi. I think I'm going to take North Carolina as well. I don't know why in my headcanon I thought they weren't 6-1 and top 25 material, but stranger things have happened. And if they get to go down to Charlotte to get walloped by Clemson, may they be the last sacrifice for Coastal Chaos.
Indeed. Sicko picks of the week. I am going against one of our coaching candidates, Marshall. I have them just winning outright over Coastal Carolina. That seems fun. Validate that Notre Dame win here. Beat a good up and coming team here. That's what I got. Jake, what you got?
Yeah, I'm going to pick Northwestern, yay, of 1 win over Nebraska. It came in Ireland. They have not won yet in America this year. And I'm going to pick them over Iowa because I'm partially willing it into happening that this is finally the game that gets the Ferentz regime at least some sort of shaky legs. Again, I think the line's Iowa by 10.5. I don't think Iowa has really much good going for them. I don't think Northwestern has much going for them, but when this game winds up being like 8-5, yeah, you'll see why it'll be sick.
Good score call right there. Yes. Kieffer, what you got?
So I already kind of spoiled this, but against the spread, I'm going with UConn over Boston College, who I think is about to get Jeff Hafley fired. I already kind of spoke to it, but I think this game is going to be pretty darn close. It's a little over a touchdown spread from what I saw. And it's at UConn. And that would be a firing. If Boston College outright loses, Hafley's gone. He has to be gone.
Oh boy!
I think some of the drama around this sport is more entertaining than the sport itself. Sometimes,
yes, this is correct. When you have awful football, you have to go to the surrounding details to draw entertainment when you're addicted to it, like we are. So, that makes sense. Next week we are previewing the women's basketball team as it is almost time for them to get going. We'll do men the next week before they really get going on their schedule. Jake, you put a tweet in the thread. What you got here for that?
Yeah, I saw that. It looked like the Lady Vols were at Georgia Tech today because Tech had posted a picture. So maybe there was some sort of secret scrimmage a la men's basketball. By the way, if y'all haven't heard, Ken and Kelly were reporting that Tech men did defeat Vanderbilt 80-76 in a secret scrimmage there. So maybe there was something going on with the Vols, but they seem to be in town for the ladies. So it's around that time each year that you kind of forget college basketball is coming until they start dropping like closed doors scrimmages and stuff. So
happens.
It's time. Yeah. It's basketball time.
And a lovely move by the Lady Vols. They presented the team with some Tasha Tough shirts for everyone involved for Tech and they showed up in Tasha Tough shirts, and Tasha's battle with cancer has been quite a bastion of something for people to follow and support and just come together as a basketball community, which has been a good thing to see. And we're glad that she's out here still coaching and doing her thing. With that, I think that's all we got for now. Either of you got any final words? Kieffer, I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. I had a really good time. If we're gonna, plug anything in here at the end, read the coaching profiles. And when thinking about coaches, I'm talking to you, Dion and Del McGee supporters. Think about the lines you're being sold and whether or not you're getting your emotions manipulated, and whether or not the reasons you want to coach are cemented in evidence or emotion. That's all I ask.
Reasonable.
I think that's fair.
We will hey, it's very Georgia Tech of us. I mean, well, what else would we expect from ourselves? That's just what we do. Anyways, Jake, please take us home.
Yep. As always, y'all know where to find us. If you found this podcast, tell your friends. Science of the Southland does appreciate all word of mouth advertising. You can find this at all major podcast distributors, and you can also find it at fromtherumble.com, where articles go up associated with this. If you have comments, feedback, questions for us, you can post it in the comments there. You can find us on Twitter or over email as well. That email is fromtherumble@gmail.com. Again, all that feedback does help us get you guys what you want to hear, whether that's guests or other features, or just what we're talking about and digging into on each show. In terms of Twitter, you can find us at FTRS blog, and we do try and interact pretty regularly there. You can find myself at Jake Grant 98 on Twitter. You can find Jack at Jack Nicholas. You can find Akshay nowhere apparently, but gameonpaper.com for all of your advanced stats needs. Kieffer, where can the people find you?
I actually forgot my Twitter handle. Let's find it.
This is great podcasting.
We just lost everyone that was listening. Just turn this podcast off right now.
At FTRS_Kieffer on Twitter.
Perfect. You can find him there, and you can also find Section 103 at Section 103. They are a great partner for this here podcast, this here blog, and you can find them at section103.com. Read Engineering a Program, and good night, good luck, go Jackets.